Dune was released in 2021, directed by Denis Villeneuve, stars Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, and many more. I hope I pronounced those names correctly. And basically, the plot of Dune is it focuses around this substance called spice and how everybody wants it, and it's pretty super rich, and there you go. And this movie is actually a part one, despite that were never appearing in any of their promotional material, but it does say that in the title card. And another thing is that I'm sorry for the wait. I was busy last week and I am still busy this week. I am trying my best to get these reviews out, so please bear with me. But yeah, aside from that, I am a bit excited for this review, considering this is the first latest review that I'm doing. And what I mean by that is I usually do movies that have already been released prior, like many years back. I just go back to them, visit them, review them, you know the deal. So this is the first time where I'm actually reviewing a movie that recently came out that everybody's still talking about, so I'm glad to actually be doing this. And just a heads up before getting into the review is that I haven't read the book or watched the original movie in the 1900s, so I'm going into Dune completely blind, so just bear that in mind. But I think that's all I gotta say with the intro. Let's move on to the story. First main point of Dune, I feel like, is the world building, and truly it is amazing. I think this is probably the best world building I've seen in a movie since probably like Star Wars. Like seriously, the politics are amazing, the different tech and sci-fi stuff is really cool, especially the whole vibe that they're going for. Especially Arrakis has this sort of Middle Eastern vibe. I really dig that. And this whole movie just feels grand, you know. There's not a lot of movies that realize how epic they are, and Dune definitely, the people who made this movie definitely realized that this movie was going to be a success, that this movie was going to be a hit, and they definitely went full leaning into that, and I definitely do appreciate it. In terms of themes, the one prominent theme I think is the theme of leadership that Paul goes through, and I feel like it's a pretty good theme, done well. Although it's not completely done yet, you can definitely see that they're gonna expand on it in the later movies. I do feel like this is a good setup for it. One problem I do have with Dune is that the ending is a bit awkward. I feel like they kind of ended in a very weird place. They should have ended either earlier or they should have went much sooner than that. So I would just put off by the ending. And overall, I just feel like the adaptation was a bit choppy. I will give it credit, the adaptation was good overall, but there were some choppy sections, especially with the structure here and there, that really made me question a lot of things. But overall, I think it was handled well, especially considering how much praise the book has gotten. I'm glad that it could have gone a lot worse, is what I'm trying to say. And in general, Dune just has a lot of potential. I feel like going forward, this can definitely be a really big franchise and definitely set up a great story for the future movies to come. In terms of characters, our main character Paul, I feel like he's pretty good, although he might seem a bit wooden at times. I feel like that comes off as intentional. He's supposed to be like this very nervous kid who doesn't know what he's doing. So his arc overall is a good setup, although it's not complete. Like I mentioned in the story section, definitely has a lot of potential going forward. In terms of antagonists, I think the Baron is really cool. He's really intimidating. I feel like he would work well in the future, but I just don't see any sort of arc present in the antagonist yet. This movie is very clearly supposed to set up just Atreides and Paul's relationship with his family and whatnot, and not the antagonist. I feel like they're going to come down the line. But if Dune definitely plans to be the next big franchise, they need an iconic antagonist. You know, a Voldemort, a Darth Vader, Thanos, one of those guys, and Dune is good to go. In terms of side characters, I feel like they're underutilized. There's a lot of cool ones, but considering who the people that they cast for them, there were definitely a lot of potential that these characters had that they kind of just didn't utilize. And overall, I just feel like the character relationships in this movie feel a bit forced, especially Paul's relationships with pretty much everybody except his mother. Like his relationship with his dad, with Duncan, all of them just feel like the director just told them, hey, can you pretend like you're friends or pretend like you're, father and son. They're like, oh, sure, can do. I'll pretend to do that. And it just feels kind of plastic. Now, how can I go through characters without mentioning the cast? And this movie's cast is absolutely stacked. I remember when I first heard it, I just couldn't believe my eyes of how many superstars were on screen for this one. And given that it's a bunch of superstars, I feel like they all did a great job. No one was a weak link. They all put on a pretty good performance. And it does leave me wondering, who are they going to cast for the next few movies, considering they killed off a lot of characters. Oscar Isaac's pretty much dead. I think Josh Brolin's character is probably dead, but they're gonna have to cast a lot more characters. So I'm wondering, are they gonna continue doing this whole super casting for the movies to come, or are they gonna tone it down a bit? In terms of cinematography, I just gotta say that this movie shot absolutely beautifully. I love what they did with the camera work as well as the lighting. I feel like the lighting is really good in this movie, and I mean, it makes sense considering how much money was on this movie. It's kind of obvious that the cinematography would look good, but still, it's outstanding regardless. Another point to mention, I feel like, is the VFX. I think they did a great job with the effects and whatnot. They look super realistic, and a lot of people believe that a big budget movies will always have good VFX, but that's not always the case. But Dune definitely does make good use of it. I also just feel like in general the cinematography really helps convey the atmosphere. For example, Arrakis feels really warm, while Harkonnen space feels really cold, while Atreides just feels neutral. I just love what they did with that, the colors, everything. And the only problem that I think I would have with cinematography is the editing. I feel like it's a bit weird and choppy, and it can make you question what's going on during certain scenes, so they could have definitely worked on that. For the soundtrack, I feel like this movie is very mystical, very grand. I love how different tracks evoke different feelings. It definitely is a good sign of a good soundtrack in this movie. And in general, I just love the sound design overall. I think that they definitely had a good selection of OST and when to use the OST. They definitely knew what they were doing there. And I also really just enjoyed the variety of music present. And not just variety in sort of instruments, but variety in sort of cultures. Arrakis, like I mentioned before, has this very Middle Eastern vibe, and the music definitely aids in that. And I know a lot of people have complained maybe it's a bit too out there, but personally, I love out there soundtracks, and this one definitely hits the nail. And I also gotta mention that one iconic track of Paul's Dream is really amazing. I definitely love it, and I can see it becoming the iconic track of this movie, of the series later on. And in general, just like with the cinematography, I feel like the soundtrack really helps build a world of Dune. And that's really important considering world building is an important aspect of Dune and you can't really convey the story without it. So soundtrack by Hans Zimmer, just outstanding. So overall, my pros of this movie are it has great world building, it feels really grand, and I like the theme. I think Paul is pretty good, the acting is also great, the shots in this movie are really good, especially as well as the VFX, and in terms of soundtrack, I really like the vibe, the sound design, and the variety used. In terms of con, I just think that the adaptation is a bit choppy, the ending is a bit awkward, the antagonists don't really have an arc. The side characters just feel underutilized and their relationships are kind of forced, as well as the editing is a bit, choppy as well. And that leads me to my final score being a 7 out of 10. I feel like this is a pretty solid score. Dune has a lot of good things going for it, but overall it definitely does fall back on a lot of character moments, as well as being a little inconsistent here and there. That's why 7's a right score for me. In the end, Dune has been a long time in the running, and now that it's out, I'm glad that it doesn't disappoint, being a solid way to kickstart possibly the biggest franchise for the next coming decade. Thanks for watching.